You wake up one morning and the world's on fire again. This time it's Trump and Iran and headlines screaming about nuclear sites, airstrikes, and retaliation. And maybe you feel that weight in your chest, that creeping fear, that ache of here we go again. You scroll through your phone and it's chaos. People arguing, leaders threatening, and behind all the noise, you feel powerless. But I need you to hear me loud and clear. This is not just about politics. This is about humanity. This is about the soul of the world waking up and realizing we are on the edge of something much bigger than we understand. You don't need to be Iranian to feel the pain of a nation constantly on the defensive. You don't need to agree with every policy to recognize the suffering of families living under the threat of war. And you don't have to like Trump to realize that reckless power, unchecked ego, and blind ambition can be the match that lights a global fire. But here's the truth that nobody talks about in those headlines. There is something greater at play. Because when man pushes past the limit, when war drums beat too loud, when power tries to silence justice, God shows up, not with a whisper, but with a warning. And if you're paying attention, you can feel it. This isn't about fear. This is about choice. When leaders gamble with lives, it becomes our job to choose differently. It becomes our job to stand for peace, to speak up for compassion, to refuse to let anger and revenge define us. And yes, it's hard. It's easy to get swept up in blame. It's easy to look at that attack and say, good, they had it coming. But real power, real strength, that's in restraint. That's in wisdom. That's in learning from the past instead of repeating it. We've been here before. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. Every time someone thinks war is the answer, it's the people, mothers, fathers, children, who pay the price. So I want you to sit with that today. I want you to remember that the news you're reading, the stories you're seeing, they're not just politics. They're people. Real people. And if you feel helpless, let me remind you that you're not. Because your voice matters, your prayers matter, your empathy matters. And that warning, that divine interruption in the middle of madness, that is not a coincidence. That is grace. When leaders forget their limits, the universe responds. And maybe that response is a wake-up call to you. Maybe this moment isn't about fear, it's about awakening. To stop being numb, to stop scrolling past injustice, to stop letting your voice stay silent when you were born to speak. You're not here just to exist. You're here to stand up, to act, to love in the face of hate, to believe in peace even when everything around you says war is inevitable. You don't have to fix the whole world, but you can start by refusing to be a bystander in a world where silence equals approval. You can speak with conviction. You can educate yourself. You can have hard conversations. You can be a light in the darkness. Because if we've learned anything from history, it's this. When good people stay silent, destruction becomes destiny. But when even one person stands up and says, no, not this time, that's when things begin to change. This is your moment, not to be afraid, but to be awake, not to be angry, but to be aware, and not to choose sides, but to choose truth. God doesn't send warnings because he wants to destroy us. He sends warnings because he wants to save us from ourselves. Listen, wake up, and decide what kind of world you want to be part of building. The power is not in the hands of one man. It's in all of us. Let's not wait for another tragedy to remember that. Let's get something straight. What's happening in the world right now isn't just about foreign policy or nuclear programs or some politician flexing their power. This is deeper than that. This is personal. Because whether you live in Tehran, New York, Karachi, or London, when bombs drop, when leaders provoke, when the threat of war looms over innocent people, your soul feels it. And if it doesn't, then you've disconnected from your humanity. Because global crises don't just exist on TV screens or news apps. They echo in our relationships, our mental health, our faith in the future. You see an airstrike on a nuclear site, and maybe it feels like something distant, but then you look at your child, or your parents, or your friends, and suddenly you realize that love doesn't know borders. That fear doesn't respect nationality. That pain, grief, and injustice are universal. And that realization, that's the bridge that connects us. It reminds us that we are one, that we are not separate from the suffering of others. And until we stop seeing us and them, we'll keep repeating the same mistakes. This isn't about taking sides in some geopolitical argument. This is about waking up to the emotional and spiritual cost of conflict. When a missile lands in a village, the vibration of that fear travels far beyond the target. It reaches homes across the world where people like you and me are quietly asking, what kind of world are we becoming? So no, you're not just an observer. You're not detached. You're not uninvolved. You're part of this story. And the moment you start feeling it, that deep, heavy weight in your chest, you've already started changing it. Because global crises may look political on the surface, but underneath, they're a mirror. They show us exactly who we are, what we allow, and what we choose to ignore. And if you're willing to look into that mirror and not flinch, that's when real transformation begins. Fear is one of the most honest emotions you'll ever feel. It shows up uninvited when the world gets loud, chaotic, and unpredictable. And right now, fear is everywhere. In the headlines, in the silence between updates, in the voice inside your head wondering, what if things spiral out of control? And guess what? That fear is valid. But here's the truth most people miss. Fear isn't weakness, it's awareness. That pounding in your chest, that sudden stillness when you hear the news, that's your body saying, pay attention. That's your soul waking up. Because fear, when harnessed correctly, becomes clarity. It becomes your signal that something isn't right, that something needs to shift, not just out there in the world, but in you. You can let fear paralyze you, or you can let it wake you the hell up. The people who make the biggest difference in moments of crisis aren't the ones who feel nothing. They're the ones who feel everything and still choose to act with courage, with intention, and with compassion. You don't get brave by pretending you're not scared. You get brave by owning the fear and deciding to move forward anyway. So when the world feels out of control, when leaders are playing dangerous games, and you feel that knot in your stomach, don't run from it. Lean into it. That fear is your power source. That fear is your reminder that you still care, that you're still human. And in a time where numbness has become the default, that awareness is a superpower. We've been conditioned to think that force equals strength, that whoever hits hardest, speaks loudest, or strikes first is the one in control. But that's a lie. Real power, it's not in launching an attack, it's in choosing not to. It's in holding back when you have every reason to lash out. Because restraint isn't weakness, it's wisdom wrapped in discipline. It takes nothing to react. It takes everything to stay grounded when your ego is screaming for revenge. And in moments like this, when powerful leaders treat war like a game of chess, restraint becomes the rarest and most courageous move anyone can make. Because when someone attacks, the easy route is to hit back harder. That's how the cycle continues. Fear breeding fear, pain breeding pain. But when someone stands in the middle of that storm and says, "No, I choose differently," that's where the chain breaks. That's where strength becomes revolutionary. Look at the people in your own life. How many times have you seen someone ruin relationships because they couldn't control their emotions? How many moments could have been saved if someone paused before they acted? It's the same on the world stage. Just because you have the power to destroy doesn't mean you should use it. In fact, the people who hold the most power are the ones who don't need to prove it. And when a nation, a leader, or even one single person decides to respond with thought instead of impulse, that's the beginning of real change. That's how peace starts, not with more fire, but with someone strong enough to stop the fire from spreading. That kind of restraint, that's the strength we need now more than ever. There's a moment, right before everything falls apart, when the universe goes quiet, when things feel tense, uncertain, like the world's holding its breath. That's not just coincidence. That's not just the calm before the storm. That's a warning. And if you're listening, not just with your ears, but with your spirit, you can feel it. God doesn't send chaos without signs. He doesn't watch us self-destruct without first tapping us on the shoulder and saying, "Stop, rethink. This is not the way." But here's the problem. We're so busy yelling, blaming, posturing, and proving ourselves right that we miss it. We miss the moment that could have saved us. We miss the grace, because warnings don't always look like flashing lights. Sometimes they come in quiet moments, in a strange dream, in a sense of unease that won't go away. Sometimes they come in the form of a tragedy that could have been worse, but wasn't, a close call meant to wake us up. And when we ignore those signs, we pay the price. This isn't about religion. It's about connection, about a higher intelligence that steps in when human ego goes too far. When we try to play God, God reminds us who we are and who we're not. And that reminder, it's mercy. It's a second chance. It's the opportunity to pause before we destroy what can't be rebuilt. So when everything around you feels unstable, when the world feels like it's standing on a wire, don't just see it as chaos. Ask yourself, what am I being shown? Because warnings from above aren't meant to scare you. They're meant to spare you. If you listen, if you're willing to change, if you're bold enough to choose a better way, you might be thinking, what difference can I make? I'm just one person. And that's exactly the lie that keeps the world stuck. That's the belief that convinces you to stay quiet when you should speak, to scroll past injustice when you should take a stand, to believe your voice doesn't matter when it absolutely does. Because here's the truth. Every movement, every shift in history, every ripple that turned into a wave started with one person who refused to stay silent. One person who said, "Not this time." One person who saw the world unraveling and decided to show up anyway, with courage, with empathy, with purpose. Your voice doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. It has to come from that deep place inside you that knows right from wrong, that still believes in humanity, that refuses to be numbed by the noise. Because in a world full of shouting and division, an honest voice grounded in truth and compassion is rare and powerful. You may not be in the White House. You may not have a seat at the table, but you've got a platform. You've got influence. Whether it's one person or 1,000, someone's listening. And when you choose to speak with purpose, to use your voice not to provoke but to uplift, not to attack but to awaken, you shift the energy. You change the story. Never underestimate the power of one person fully awake. Never forget that revolutions have started with whispers, with prayers, with quiet acts of resistance that no one noticed until they did. You matter more than you know. So don't wait for permission. Don't wait for things to get worse. Start using your voice now, because it's not just power, it's responsibility. History doesn't scream, it echoes. And if you listen closely, you'll hear it whisper the same truth over and over again. When good people stay silent, destruction becomes inevitable. It's not the loudest voices that always do the most damage. It's the quiet ones who say nothing, who look away, who convince themselves, this isn't my problem. That silence, that's what gives chaos permission to grow. We've lived this before. Nations invaded, cities destroyed, families shattered, and every single time there were people who saw it coming, people who felt it in their gut, people who knew it was wrong, but froze. They were too afraid to speak, too busy, too unsure of what to say. And so the world burned while they waited for someone else to fix it. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Silence is not neutral. It's a choice that tells the oppressor, you can keep going. A choice that tells the victim, you're on your own. And a choice that tells yourself, I don't have the courage today. But what happens when we do this day after day? We become part of the very problem we claim to hate. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to be perfect to stand for what's right. You just have to show up. You just have to say, this matters. Because when you do, you give others permission to do the same. Courage is contagious, but so is silence. And the choice is always yours. You don't need to wait for history to judge the moment. You're living in it. You're writing it with every decision you make. The question is, what kind of legacy will your silence leave behind? And what would change if today you chose to break it? Peace isn't just a global agenda, it's a personal decision. It doesn't start in conference rooms or between governments. It starts with you, with how you speak, how you treat people, how you respond when you're triggered, when you're hurt, when you're angry. We all say we want peace in the world, but how many of us actually live it in our everyday lives? You can't demand peace from the world if you're fueling chaos in your own home. You can't call for calm while choosing conflict in your conversations. And you can't expect the world to change if you keep repeating the same emotional habits: blame, bitterness, ego, pride. Peace isn't passive. It doesn't just fall from the sky. It's work. It's uncomfortable. It takes intention. It's choosing to listen instead of attack. It's choosing to pause instead of react. It's choosing to forgive when your ego wants to punish. When leaders fail to model peace, it becomes even more critical for everyday people, you and me, to model it ourselves. Because peace spreads the same way conflict does, person to person, heart to heart, choice by choice. And the small things matter. The way you speak to your partner when you're frustrated, the way you respond to a stranger's ignorance, the way you show up in conversations about injustice, war, or suffering. That's where real peace begins. This isn't about being perfect. This is about being conscious, about asking yourself, what energy am I adding to the world today? And if the answer isn't peace, then you still have work to do. The world doesn't just need more activists, it needs more emotionally awake people who practice peace like a discipline. Because if we all just focused on making peace personal, the world would be unrecognizable. And it starts with you, right now. We live in a world that's constantly trying to numb us with entertainment, with distractions, with endless scrolling, with bad news overload. And after a while, it starts to work. You see another headline about war, another image of people suffering, and you barely flinch. Not because you don't care, but because you've been trained to disconnect, to say, there's nothing I can do. But let me tell you something. You were not born to be numb. You were born to feel deeply. You were built to care, to respond, to stand up when something inside you says, this isn't right. That aching in your chest when you see injustice, that lump in your throat when you hear about innocent people caught in conflict, that's not weakness. That's your humanity. That's the part of you the world is trying to silence, but it's also the part of you that's needed the most. Staying numb doesn't protect you. It disconnects you. It robs you of your empathy, your clarity, and your ability to create real change. When you shut down emotionally, you also shut down spiritually. And when enough people go numb, the world gets cold, compassion fades, and we lose sight of who we are. So instead of shutting down, wake up. Feel the weight of what's happening, not to drown in it, but to let it drive you to something greater. Let it move you to learn more, speak more, love more, act more. Your pain is not the problem. Your indifference is. You don't have to fix everything, but you do have to stay emotionally present, because that's where real transformation begins. The moment you choose to feel again, to let your heart break for others, to let your soul burn with purpose, that's the moment you reclaim your power. And that's how healing begins. Not by avoiding the pain, but by walking through it with your eyes wide open and your heart still beating. This moment, right now, is not just a headline or a news update. It's a defining test, a divine test. One that isn't just happening out there in the world, but deep inside every one of us. Because when everything around you feels like it's falling apart, when leaders are making reckless choices, when fear is spreading like wildfire, that's when your true character is revealed. Not in how you react on the surface, but in the choices you make when no one is watching. It's easy to stay calm when life is peaceful, but can you stay grounded when the world is shaking? Can you still hold compassion when anger feels justified? Can you still believe in humanity when people show you the worst of it? That's the test. That's where your soul gets refined. Because in every moment of chaos, there's an invitation, a divine invitation to rise above it. This isn't about religion. It's about something bigger than that. It's about soul, about morality, about being the kind of person who chooses integrity over impulse, peace over ego, and purpose over pride. When the world loses its way, it needs people who know who they are. It needs people who don't just follow the crowd, but lead with conviction, who don't just pray for peace, but live it. You were born for moments like this, not to collapse under pressure, but to rise under purpose, to ask yourself, what does this moment require of me? Maybe it's courage, maybe it's patience, maybe it's truth. But whatever it is, it's not passivity, it's not numbness, and it's not silence. God doesn't allow us to face storms so we can be destroyed. He allows them so we can be defined. And how you show up in the middle of this chaos, that's what defines you, not your words, not your social media posts, your actions, your heart, your spirit. This is the test. And the only question left is, will you rise to meet it? So now that you've heard it all, the fear, the warning, the challenge, the truth, what do you do with it? You don't scroll past. You don't shrink back. You don't tell yourself it's someone else's problem. Because once you've been awakened, you can't go back to sleep, not without betraying your own soul. This moment we're living in, it's not random. It's not just politics or conflict. It's a mirror, and it's showing you exactly who you are when things get hard, when the world gets loud, when morality is on the line. You were not put here to watch. You were put here to act, to feel, to stand up, to speak truth, and to be the light in a world that desperately needs one more person brave enough to shine. If you're waiting for the perfect time to care, it's now. If you're waiting for someone else to fix it, stop, because that someone else might just be you. This is the wake-up call, not just for leaders, not just for nations, but for every single human heart that still beats with hope, with purpose, and with love. So take the fear and turn it into fire. Take the pain and turn it into power. Let this moment define you, not by how you reacted, but by how you rose. That's how we change the world, one awake, courageous soul at a time. Let that soul be yours.